Greetings to all our listeners. A very warm welcome to the 17th episode of BPod, brought to you by the business cluster of IIM Visakhapatnam. In today's episode, we have with us Mr. Manish Shah, who is the academic head at IMS Learning Resources Private Limited. Established in 1977, IMS is one of India's pioneering institutions in management education training. He is a great orator and mentor, and due to his approachable nature, he is popular among his students. Highly skilled in aptitude and reasoning, he is one of the finest teacher one can have to tackle competitive examinations. Earlier in his career, after completing his MBA in finance from Nirma University, he worked as assistant manager at Adani Ports and SEZ Limited, post which he went on to hold the position of regional manager at Endeavor Careers. We are extremely delighted to have you with us, sir. I hope you are doing well.
Thanks, Jay. I'm doing well. I hope you all are doing well as well.
Yes, sir. Sir, before starting with the questions, I would like to ask you that you have been a mentor to many students in their crucial stage of life while they were making up decisions of getting into a B school. So how do you feel when such students reach out to you after getting into their dream B school?
Oh, that's the reward. That's the reward, I would say. In our industry, that is CAT preparation industry, we see it as the biggest reward because ultimately the day student gets enrolled, we feel that sense of responsibility that it's not something that is going to happen for sure. It's not probably certain that we are going to meet the complete expectation in terms of the goal the student has planned. So it's I won't say burden, but we also feel that sense of responsibilities at the moment we get the final result. It's our result as well. So I think that's the easiest part, and that is something that I can't even express properly on this forum because that is best experience. So that some of the luxuries that we only have.
Lovely, sir. Okay. So starting with the questions, sir, you earned your MBA, joined corporate for a year, and then shifted to CAT preparation industry. What compelled you to do it?
Well, I think it was 2011, and I was working with Adani Port. The work was fine. I was doing good. My work was appreciated, but I can't say I was enjoying it completely. I felt I can do something even more, something more passionately. So I look forward to my own interest. So it is something as simple as I was good with maths, and I was like you guys. I recently concluded my CAT preparation, so that was something that was in my mind as well. So I thought of exploring this industry. I felt that this is something that I can really excel at, and that is something that I really believed it. You should be doing whatever you do, but in an amazing manner. Then all the parts, be it the growth in terms of the designation, growth in terms of the monetary benefits, everything will be taken care of. I can't say it was a very well thought decision, but then things worked out perfectly. And the way I see, probably after a year or two, I started understanding that this is something uh, that puts me in a very lucky situation that I'm able to impart value to the society. Not in all the industries you directly add values to the society. So I stuck here, and this is something that wonderfully happened with me.
Okay. So, sir, continuing on the same line, when I was studying for the CAT, I noticed that several of our classmates had a high percentage, but were unable to convert the interview. So, what do you think the key reasons are, and what advices do you have for MBA aspirants?
Okay, fine. So this is little irony that people, when they join a CAT coaching institute, they feel that they are preparing for CAT only. The way we see it as an admission preparation process. So for any B school like yours only, the admission process is actually two-phase. You take CAT score and then you go for the interview round, because interview is the only selection process in this world, be it B school entrance, be it job, be it even arranged marriage. The interview is actually the most reliable selection process. Everything else probably adds some value to it. In B school's case, I would say no B school can simply take interview of 2 lakh plus applicants that CAT sees every year. So it was viable for them to keep a filtering process like aptitude test that is a fair practice, so that a decent number of students reach the interview stage. And this is the importance of CAT. Without CAT, you can't get opportunities to top B schools of the country. That is the importance. But with CAT good score, you can't ensure that you get admission for sure, because that should not happen. So every aspirant should see admission process as that includes two parts. First is CAT preparation, where you work on your aptitude, and second is PI preparation. So what my suggestion is, first of all, accept this fact. PI is going to be a reality of your life. If you are really good at aptitude but bad at person interview, you might lose out on the biggest opportunities. So from the day you start preparing on quant, verbal, LRDI, you should also keep an eye on your communication, your confidence, your career clarity, your profile. Can you improve your profile, etc. So better to be well informed than be surprised at the end. That is my advice.
Okay. That is something coming to me as nostalgia as well.
I understand.
Okay. Sir, so like I want to ask you, what steps did the education industry took during the COVID era to address its deficiencies in operating in a conventional manner?
Okay. So this is memory lane, I would say. March 2020, when everything was stopped. So, and we were an offline trainer. So as a teacher, we always believed in looking into students' eyes and understand whether the student is learning or not. And suddenly that right was not with us anymore. And if I talk about my own industry, we are result-driven industry. We don't have an option of mass promotion. For example, in schools, you have option of mass promotion, but we had to deliver. We knew that COVID or not, CAT was supposed to happen. So we had to ensure that the quality doesn't get diluted. And so the simple one-word answer is we adapted. We had to adapt. And we wouldn't have believed that online learning is possible. But we started believing it, we started excelling at it. Thankfully, the infrastructure was ready, be it seamless, cheap internet, be it availability of affordable smartphones, and be it the connecting platforms like Zoom, Microsoft, etc., which made things possible at a day's notice. Yes, we had to adapt. We had to understand that this is something that is different, but this is the only way with us. It started with the only way, and then now we are enjoying the benefits of it, I would say, when the online is not the only option anymore. We had to train our students as well to get the best out of the entire learning process. I have heard that school teachers have done it in a different manner by making videos compulsorily on. Students are supposed to sit in uniform so that they feel like that part of the day belongs to school. Probably that was not that strict with the coaching institute. We relied more on students' professionalism and sincere attitude that they would be listening to us. We had to push students to be little more responsive during the session so that they can raise hands, they can raise their queries. We had to devise some methods in the post-class phase to ensure that students are in touch and all the problems reach us in a seamless manner. So yes, many things happen. I don't know how can I summarize it.
Okay. So, sir, continuing on the same, like while the education business moves towards an online platform, as you have said, what abilities do teachers need to learn in order to teach in an online environment?
Okay, so how to teach online effectively? I'll put it very simply. A typical online session in my industry, when I say my industry, I would also like to speak on the behalf of entire test prep. That would be it UPSC preparation or be it JEE preparation. A typical online lecture consumes more than 1.5 times the energy that an offline lecture consumes. If you don't do that, probably the engagement quotient would reduce, and that directly affects what percentage of the content will be absorbed by the audience, right? So my suggestion to anybody who wish to do the online teaching job properly is to be really very energetic during those 1 hour, 2 hour long session. And energy is something that will be received by the students. Some of the teachers have to teach for good 2 hours, 1.5 hours, which is not that easy for the audience. So good energy probably increases the probability of knowledge being received by the student. Second, they need to learn that every word, every statement, anything that you're going to say should be pre-planned. Not every word literally, but then there shouldn't be a small patch of 10 minutes where you are simply just re-uttering the same words. You have to be moving at a decent pace. Like you will be bored in a movie which got stuck for 10 minutes and got nothing new. Similarly, is the case with an online lecture as well. In an offline lecture, students can't run away from the room, but in online lecture, students can run away from the room. This is not related to schools, but this is probably related to the coaching institutes. It is still possible. So you need to be really engaging. You need to be really creative with what you do during the session. You need to be expressive. You need to be you need to have right sense of humor as well, so that you also enjoy what you are doing. That's a common advice to any teacher from my side, be it offline or online. But in online, humor is the one of the things that keeps students engaged, a right proportion. You need to be well versed with the tools that you are using. For example, we had to understand that our PPT should be efficiently designed, so that when I hit enter, I know what content is going to pop up. Otherwise, it would be two narrators narrating different things at the same time. So you should be well aware of what is there in your PPT. It should be either made by you or either well understood by you.
Okay. And sir, do you believe that e-learning can replace classroom learning based on the trends in online education over the last 2 years and in the future? Will offline coaching be phased out of the market?
Oh, no, never. In fact, we have the evidence. So I believe in May or June, government allowed all the coaching institutes to operate with the right restrictions. And we allowed all the IMS students to choose either online or offline mode as per their wish. And we just wanted to adjust with them what we have been doing since last couple of years. Surprisingly, 70% of the students, roughly 75% of the students chose offline learning over online learning. Now that's something that this is data of Gujarat state, right? And this more students who are enrolling with us, most of them are also coming in offline mode as well. So I would say online is going to stay forever. It is by far not going to replace offline, because especially in the competitive exam preparation world, it is not just the education, or it is not just the knowledge students looking for. It is the entire ecosystem. When I say ecosystem, it starts with a typical lecture, material, an ambience of competitive environment, regular mentorship. And that is something that becomes easy when you see students around you raising their hand, asking right questions. You see the right competition. So offline is going to stay forever. Online is also going to stay. So these are like two products that we have at present. So if I'm teaching CAT, there will be certain batches of online CAT, there will be certain batches of offline CAT. But yes, I must acknowledge the fact that online teaching has made our reach immense now. It was not viable to open a center in distant parts of the country. It was not viable, feasibly, financially viable, I would say, because you need certain number of students just to make the entire set of work as far as economics is concerned. But now we don't need to open a center there. Students can learn through the same set of faculty members with the same quality education at their home. So student might be sitting in a small village with a phone in his hand, and he's probably learning from the best faculty of CAT preparation at his place. So online is a wonderful boon that has happened, but thankfully it is by far not going to replace offline learning.
Definitely, sir. And talking about the online coaching, what are your thoughts on major edtech behemoth like Byju's business strategy of actively acquiring other coaching institutes? Do you believe that such methods would stifle the growth of new businesses?
Okay, so basically big edtech companies acquiring small companies. Okay, yes. The way I see is there was no edtech 10 years back, I would say. There were coaching institutes, and I may not be completely right. It is probably my personal opinion, but educators or academicians probably were not seen with this much respect 10 years back. Or probably somebody being a teacher in any of the field was not probably seen with the same reputation or respect 10 years back. But now I see that some companies, be it Byju's or Unacademy, they are big companies. Funds they have a lot of funds, and investors are have invested money in them, and they are growing like anything. They are the lead sponsors of major events, and that actually, first of all, is a proof that now the India as a country has started understanding that this is a sector that is the next big thing. Now, when I say the edtech, edutech has become next big thing, it has started becoming it as well. it comes with many benefits. When it comes with many benefits, for example, higher quality of education, good people are encouraged to join education industry to provide even better content, better the talent, better the service. So as society as a whole gets benefited. It comes with some minor problems as well. For example, when e-commerce was booming, we saw so much consolidation. For example, Flipkart acquired Myntra and many other examples. I think that is a very common practice for any sector which is at this stage, when A acquires B, C acquires D. And when we say a company acquires another company, it doesn't necessarily mean a wrong thing. The way I see in most of the deals, both the companies get benefited. They have synergy benefits. They have, let's say, they don't need to compete with one another unnecessarily. So consolidation doesn't necessarily result into something negative. So entire development that has happened in last few years, including rise of some big companies or A acquiring B or consolidation in the market, I think this is these are the byproducts of the entire edutech sector rising. So this is perfectly fine. It is not going to trifle the growth of any company. Rather, it would rather attract more talent towards this industry.
Sir, it may be your personal opinion, but you ideated it very well. They're talking about more of a national agenda. The National Education Policy 2020, NEP, has opened up new doors for Indian students. But is the economy ready to provide such specialized career opportunities, especially in this post-COVID era?
Well, national education policy is really a huge task. It's a huge task, and with my limited understanding, I would like to say it's a need of the time. Having said that, it's a task of mammoth size. It needs change at multiple level, and most of the changes are at infrastructure level, be it physical infrastructure like schools or preschools, or the entire restructuring of the textbooks, educating the existing pool of faculty members, adding more faculty members, etc. So challenges are going to be of different scale altogether, but I think that's the need of the time. There are many challenges, something that I can foresee whether this will happen or not. But before I quote any of them, I would like to say that no matter what challenges are lying ahead, no matter how many failures we might see in the implementation of the same, the overall benefit are far greater than this. I believe that no significant change comes without resistance. Resistance is going to be there at every stage. Some primary challenges that I understand in the national economical education policy and its implementation are as simple as when you say that at present 26% of the graduate or the audience which is supposed to get education, that is students till 18 years, only 26% of them are getting education. So government has taken a very ambitious target of making it double, that is roughly 52% in next 15 years. That is making the existing capacity double, and not just double, mathematically putting, the population itself would also increase. So you are looking at a growth of more than 100% in next 15 years. That is the first need. And this growth, the capacity enhancement should happen at every level, starting from, I would say, Anganwadi to primary school to secondary school. That needs a lot of funding. That needs huge number of lakhs and lakhs of teachers to be trained, lakhs and lakhs of support staff to be there to maintain those Anganwadi and schools. This will need a lot of effort. One more issue that I see, which can be a possible solution to this problem as well, is funding. From where will the money come? One simple statement that I could read in the proposal was that the government will start diverting not 4.5% of the budget, but 6% of the budget to education. That was the need, definitely. But that's a proposal, and I sincerely wish that that happens. But government itself has many challenges. COVID itself is first challenge, and anything related to COVID gets the first priority, and there is nothing wrong in it. So if government has to divert good amount of funds toward recovery of COVID affected sectors, or government has a put huge emphasis towards healthcare as well, or because of any other reasons, if we cannot divert 6% of the budget towards this project for a good number of years, probably this will not be effective, as effective as it has been proposed. I really feel there is a strong need of public-private partnership here, so that funds keep coming easily. with public-private partnership, probably greater expertise, greater ownership can be transferred towards such project. So this is something that is going to be very, very complicated, but it's the need of the time. And I've read some examples of many small countries, not as big as India, many small countries changing the entire economy fundamentally by just tweaking their education system. This is more than a tweak, definitely. And all the best to entire education system, which is going to see a big change thanks to new education policy.
Thank you for your words of wisdom. I am sure our listeners will learn a great deal from this interaction, as have I. On this note, I would like to conclude the 17th episode of our podcast series. Once again, on behalf of IIM Visakhapatnam, I would like to thank Mr. Manish Shah for taking out his valuable time and addressing our enthusiastic student cohort. To all our listeners, have a great time and take care. Till then, VPod team signing off. We'll see you soon in the next episode.
Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.